Capitalism is the only system in existence today. Nothing other than capitalism has ever been given room in the popular imagination for the past 30 years. There is a prevalent belief nowadays that capitalism is the only functional political and economic system, and that it is now almost impossible to conceive of a convincing alternative. The British Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher, who famously proclaimed there is no alternative, arguably best expressed this sentiment regarding the state of the globe. Welcome to the Financial Flow. Please like and subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications to stay up on our latest videos. The tenet of capitalism realism holds that the use of economic models has reached its limit. Politics can now focus on improving the terminus appearance. Furthermore, it is simple to understand how dominant that feeling is. When baby formula shortages caused a nationwide scramble earlier this year, Mayor Pete had his own little capitalist realism moment. For instance, he claimed that because this is a capitalist nation, neither the government nor businesses should manufacture infant formula. Pete found it incomprehensible that, even in a crisis, anything other than a market solution to a problem could be proposed. As he stated, it is simply not what capitalist nations do, and capitalist realism is a sentiment that permeates both our inner selves and political speech. For the majority of generations born after the 1980s, capitalism is the starting point and the finish of our political imagination. Rarely anyone endorses capitalism in its entirety, but most of us who lived through the neoliberal era hold a deep-seated notion that capitalism can be opposed, challenged, and even modified. That, despite some leeway for maneuver, capitalism cannot be defeated. The end of the planet is simpler to envision than the demise of capitalism. We should first discuss how this notion poisons us all. And the demise of alternatives is where to begin. Almost nobody believes that capitalism is truly managing the world all that well. Every year, social services continue to be decimated, the global wealth gap widens, environmental collapses become more possible, and we continue to have economic crisis either in the form of recession or inflation. The situation is dire, and there are obvious ways that an economic model that prioritizes development and profit over all else is supported by the most powerful nations in the world. At the very least, significantly adds to the mess we're in. However, there is still a part of you that struggles to think of a better option. Even if something is bad, we should be thankful that it could be worse. Even critiques of capitalism can end up supporting capitalist realism after years of repetition. When we critique capitalism, presumably the best system of all, we are creating an even deeper hole for everything else since all the alternatives have been depicted as so unredeemably, inexcusably bad, so devoid of complexity or reason, so biased and deterministic. After all, anything else must be horrific if capitalism can be this terrible. And that's just one example of how capitalism realism has permeated our culture and gotten so deeply embedded in our thoughts. It's not just that capitalism is the best economic system we have, it's even more essential than that for it to have this kind of unassailable status, as the only one that can function. Because of the way the world operates, capitalism isn't even a viable option. When faced with a difficult decision, it doesn't even exist. It's organic. Its resistance is useless, just like the opposition to the rules of physics. The most well-known manifestation of this idea, among countless others, is that capitalism is merely a reflection of human nature. It is frequently stated that humans, like all other animals, are innately greedy, aggressive, and selfish. Therefore, the only system that could ever survive with human nature was capitalism. A general description of capitalism as the only economic system to have elements like competition or self-interest, and the notion that human nature and the natural world, more broadly, only reward one thing: competition, are the two ideas that give rise to this notion. But let's swiftly reject those two notions. With specific requirements and a very short history, capitalism is a unique economic system. At least three factors set capitalism apart from earlier and future economic models. One is the existence of capital, or money in basic terms, which is mostly used for expansion. Instead of money, that's merely a transaction or accounting technique. For instance, 2. Private property is the ownership of the means of economic production by a single person. This includes items like enterprises, farms, and factories. instead of collectively, and as a result, they are controlled by the actions of the class that owns them, which is inevitably outnumbered. Additionally, there are three-wage jobs where the class without private property sells its labor to the class that does. For payment, long before capitalism, there were markets, competition, and other forms of self-interest. They might even continue to exist after, but they don't define it. If they did, the definition would be vague and useless. Competition and greed are innate to humans or what makes us human. You've probably heard the phrase survival of the fittest, used to define Darwin's theory of evolution. Defenders of capitalism are not by coincidence attracted to the characteristics of Darwinian theory of evolution. This is not to suggest that competition isn't an element of the natural world, nor is it absent from so-called human nature, but it is obviously not the only factor that drives how the universe works. It was designed with capitalism in mind. A natural law of nature is sociability, much as it is mutual struggle. Humans always display selflessness, without consideration for reward or self-interest. Selflessness is a natural component of how people and nature operate, just as greed is. Building an economy that promotes greed is not justified by the mere fact that it exists. However, capitalism has continued to exist. Since socialism and other alternative economic models have failed, it is claimed that the triumph of capitalism in establishing itself as the dominant economic system is simply the result of the natural order of the world. These claims have a manifest destiny-style logic to them. When you listen to the advocates of capitalism, you hardly ever hear them mention historical context. Instead, the commonly accepted view is that capitalism functions because that is how the world operates. Trump is most likely the best illustration of this. In his 2016 campaign, he said he would manage the government like a business, bringing capitalist realism to its logical conclusion. The notion that the logic of commercial markets, profit-seeking, and other factors inevitably result in the most desirable outcomes in any situation is implicit in the sentence. You can also include the equally pervasive notion that supporting capitalism is just plain pragmatism in this list of how capitalist realism works. The rest is filthy and ideological. Ideological also denotes bad. These several stories work together to try to prove that capitalism is neutral in its existence, that is permanently fused to reality's framework. The actual world is imposed on top of socialism or communism. They are merely attempts to alter the world from its current state to force a philosophy on the world, but not capitalism. Capitalism is the truth, just the way the world is. Additionally, one advantage of capitalist realism is how well it protects capitalism from crisis. Every society experiences crisis from time to time, but capitalism has built-in mechanism that causes crisis every 5 to 10 years. Under capitalism, the conflicting logic of rising sales and decreasing costs nearly invariably results in an overproduction problem. If capitalism is the foundation upon which the world is constructed, rather than an economic model that we may choose to adapt or reject, it will never be called into question. Realistic capitalism can actually blind us to the source of some of our issues. So, how can we challenge the notion that capitalism is the only option? People need to research and consider various ideas, such as the economy. The economy is a creation of our own. It can function differently if we so want. We don't have to be on the defensive all the time. We can prepare for these things and democratically manage the economy. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to our channel for more content like this. Have a good one.